Hi, welcome to my podcast, Reclaim. I am your host, Thaís Sky. I have supported women navigate the complexities of being human for over 10 years. This podcast is where I disseminate some of those learnings and offer thoughts and guests to guide you into your healing. Welcome. Hello, beautiful humans. Thaís Sky here. Welcome to Reclaim the podcast. This is one of my favorite places on the internet. I love having an opportunity to come to you almost every week to share my thoughts, my insights, what I've learned, what I'm grappling with, my challenges, my opportunities, just all of the things in hopes that it supports you in how you may think about and experience your life. That's what Reclaim is all about. You know, despite the really big title, what does it mean to reclaim? I mean, gosh, what a word. There's so many definitions to it. Right now, I'm really sitting with thinking about how we can reclaim the life that we want rather than the life that has been conditioned within us. And there's a topic I want to bring to all of you today for us to think about together. But first, I just wanted to name that I haven't shared a new episode in about, 3 weeks? The last episode that I shared was about marriage and babies and these kind of more womenly conversations or humans with wombs conversation. And I think, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes that has prevented me from being fully present with the podcast. I'm going through a pretty massive transition in my work in that I am almost done my hours necessary to become a psychotherapist. In the journey of becoming a psychotherapist in the state of California is that you have to accrue 3,000 hours. And I am shy, just a couple hundred hours from that 3,000 hour goal. So I'm so close to being done the hours portion of becoming a licensed psychotherapist. I still have to submit those hours. And once I submit the hours, then you have to go through a waiting period while the board is processing your application. And then you have to study for an exam, take an exam, and then I'll become licensed. So I have a little while yet. But I am going through a transition right now as I change where my time goes. I am currently working at a community mental health clinic, and that is going to be coming to a close. This doesn't change anything in my coaching practice, my one-on-one coaching, my mentorship with Women Rise. It doesn't change anything in that realm. But anyway, I'm babbling. So because of this transition that I am undergoing, I have been in a period of reflection. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, how oftentimes transitions can be a really beautiful liminal space where we are in the process of a new sense of identity, right? A new chapter. We are literally in the process of flipping the page. And I think it can be very easy for us to want to rush through this process and get to the other side. And there's something actually very poetically beautiful about giving ourselves the space to just be in a transition. And all of the ways that can be really, really challenging and bring up a lot of feelings and thoughts and experiences. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I have slowed things down in all sorts of ways in order to make myself as present as possible in this transition. The other thing that's been going on in the back end is literally yesterday, I had the closing ceremony for my year-long cohort of Worthy Women Rise. If you're new to my space, Worthy Women Rise is my signature group program. It's the only group program that I currently run. I've been running it for 6 years now, 9 iterations or 9 cohorts, I believe 9. I don't think I've reached the number 10 yet, but I'm getting there. And I decided not to launch a new cohort in 2020 in order for me to really commit to the women in this cohort, as well as my one-on-one work. And I'm really glad that I did that because this year-long container has really allowed me to grow in such an exponential way as a facilitator and human. And I'm glad that I've been able to be really present to it and have the space and time to be in this journey of learning so much about what it means to hold a year-long container. And oh my gosh, it is so profound, the changes that can happen when we commit to something more long term. I remember when I was first launching Worthy Women Rise this time last year, I had experts tell me that no one would really buy a year-long kind of shadow depth work type program, and I proved them wrong. This has been my largest group that I run, the longest group, and the deepest work that I've done in a group. And it was so profound to see the ways in which the women in the group have changed and grown as a result of being in this container. But I am in the process of mourning this loss. It was a really beautiful space, and it took up a really important place in my heart. And so I am in the grieving process of the end of that work. And so that's where you'll find me, in a liminal transitional space in different facets of my professional life. And I come to you wanting to kind of dissect a post that I wrote on Instagram. A lot of my podcasts are inspired by what I write on Instagram. And it got some really wonderful feedback. And so I thought I would share with you the post and then kind of spend more time unpacking what I really meant in the post. Because I'm often limited on Instagram by how much I can write. But on the podcast, I can, go for as long as it feels right. So this is what I wrote. And I actually was having these thoughts really late one night, and I just needed to get these thoughts out of my head. And so I pulled up the notes app on my phone. I jotted this down. Then the next day I just had to do a little bit of fine tuning, and then I was able to post. So this really felt like a kind of emotional just dumping out of something that was really landing in my heart at that point in time. So I wrote, I struggle with this prevalent idea that because life is short, we need to forgive quicker and let things go and accept things more. It's such a common trope, and it can feel super inspiring in certain moments. But I wonder if we have it all wrong. Maybe living life to the fullest isn't about how quickly we can accept and move on, but more about how deeply we can let ourselves feel and experience the full scope of the human experience. Maybe it's less about life is short, so forgive quickly, and more about life is short, so don't be afraid to feel it all. To let yourself be the messy person that you are. I don't want the brevity of my life to dictate how much I am allowed to feel. I want to embody fire and fullness and look back at my life and think, wow, I really gave every conflict, every challenge, every hardship my very best. I want to be known as the one who showed up for myself unapologetically. Everything else is just cherry on top. So let me rewind a little bit and just share context for what was coming up for me that inspired me to write this. It doesn't take very far searching on the internet for you to find people saying something along the lines of, life is short. And this idea that life is short usually comes to us at a time of crisis, right? Let's say we just experienced death in the family, or we just experienced the loss of a job, or something really drastic that we weren't anticipating happened. And we are immediately reminded in those moments that life is so short, that we're really not guaranteed a full 90 years, 100 years, etc., that we're actually not guaranteed tomorrow. And there's something that can really fill the heart with awe and a desire to not take things so bigly when we think of this idea that life is short, right? So usually in these moments of crisis, in these moments of grief, in these moments where we're kind of really trying to make sense of and make meaning of something really challenging that just happened, there's something very hopeful that comes when we think of it as life is short. And that's when things get a little dicey. Life is short, So what do we do with the fact that life is short? It is very, very inspiring, I think, in those moments to say, life is short, so live it fully, forgive quickly, let things go faster. Don't take things so personally. Lighten up, laugh more, right? it's very inspiring in those moments to think of this ideal place that exists within all of us. This really yummy, warm place within us that tells us that these things that we take so seriously and so bigly, that feel so overwhelming, actually in the grand scheme of things isn't that big of a deal. When we think of life is short, we are often asked to locate ourselves in the landscape of humanity. This oftentimes happens for me when I go to the ocean. When I go visit Mama Ocean and I'm watching the waves roll in, it really taps into my smallness, and not smallness as in insignificance, but my smallness as in just how vast the world is, how vast the universe is, and how small I am in comparison. And that maybe these things that feel so burdensome in my heart, when I look at it from a 30,000 feet perspective, or when I look at the ocean, or when I think about the size of the universe, that maybe the things that I'm struggling with aren't that big. There's something really powerful about tapping into this place within us. And I don't want anything that I say in the preceding sentences to diminish or override the fact that we all have this beautiful, expansive part of ourselves that can really understand just how trivial our lives are, and how trivial our problems are, and how much our lives are actually more full and more joyous and more expansive than we usually give credit to. It can be so easy for us to get caught in the trees that we miss the forest. Yes. And there's nothing like a helicopter ride, for example, or being on an airplane, or climbing a mountain, or having some type of view, being on top of the building, to see the vastness of humanity, to see the whole forest, and to just be taken back by how beautiful it all is. That each of our lives is a masterpiece. A masterpiece that we often forget when we're so hyper obsessive about each note. And so, in that spirit, life is so short, my love. Seize the opportunities. Life is too short to believe in our smallness. We are so much more capable than we think we are. I love this feeling. And I think it's important for us to, throughout our lives, have these moments of a deep knowing that life is short. And it can get very tempting in our attempts to make meaning of a loss, of an ending, of a change, of a crisis, of a challenge of some kind, for us to tap into a way of saying life is short, so we shouldn't have the struggles that we have. That we should just be able to, because of the power of our mind, not take things so personally. That we should be able to, just by evoking the feeling of forgiveness, to forgive. That these experiences are somehow valid if we just demand it to be so. So let's talk about forgiveness, for example. That just because we say to ourselves, life is short, so forgive quickly, that we then should be able to just forgive. That we should, boom, let go. That just because we are in this expansive state, that means that letting go is the place to go internally, spiritually, deeply. I think that there's something in that feels very much gaslighty, that feels like an attempt to override our shadow or override the difficulty of the human experience. When we think of life is short, so live your life to the fullest, we're talking about a spiritual experience, yes? We're talking about an expansive knowing of our place amongst things, yes? But that is a state of existence, but it is not our permanent state. And I don't actually think that the invitation as humans is to be in that permanent state. If we think about it in this idea of like we're not human beings doing spiritual practices, but we're spiritual beings doing, what is it? I don't even remember, doing human whatever. You all get the gist, right? Is that we're actually spiritual beings. And we're learning how to really be human. What's helpful about that is that we don't actually have to attempt to be at that eternal state all the time, every time, but that state just exists within us. Life is not about learning how to override our pain so we don't feel pain and access joy 24/7. It's not about being in an expansive state permanently. At least that's not my understanding of spiritual journey or our healing journey. I'm not here to override my pain. I'm not really that interested in becoming a painless human. I'm not actually here to bypass the human part. I don't actually want to feel less. I don't want to not feel things personally if it means to not feel things. I'm a big feeler. I have big feelings and I'm very passionate about those feelings. And I'm learning very, very intimately that I once was taught that letting things go was the best way to be human, but that actually the best way for me to be human is to understand where I can't let things go. That it's not about just forcing myself to forgive by declaring that I need to forgive people, but by becoming intimately curious about why it's so hard for me to forgive that person. If you think about our lives as a masterpiece, it can get really easy for us to get caught up in the notes, right? It can be very easy for us to get caught up in the minutia of each piece, that we forget that we are a masterpiece. But I don't think the answer then is for us to just bulldoze over the notes and just keep, gaslighting ourselves into believing that we are a masterpiece. No. I believe that our invitation is to learn how to play the notes that are in front of us in the best way we can. It's about learning how to face our internal experiences without turning away when it becomes difficult or challenging. So in what I wrote on my Instagram, right? Let me pull it up here. I wonder if we have it all wrong. Maybe living life to the fullest isn't about how quickly we can accept or move on, but more about how deeply we can let ourselves feel and experience the full scope of the human experience. Only when we can fully experience our lives can we then let things go more quickly. Do you see that? Forgiveness is the last step. If we demand ourselves to forgive, if we demand ourselves to understand, if we demand ourselves to accept, we miss out on a vast richness of who we are and why we're having a hard time in that moment forgiving, accepting, understanding, moving on. And when we can begin to understand, turns out forgiveness comes a lot faster. If we're even meant to forgive. I don't necessarily think that forgiveness is the end-all be-all for healing. But I do think that it comes much more naturally when we're not demanding it of ourselves. This evokes for me an image of how often as little children, our parents think that they're teaching us morality and how to do things right when they force us to apologize. Yes, you hit your sister, apologize. And it doesn't actually matter how we're feeling. It doesn't actually matter if we're defending ourselves. It doesn't actually matter if the circumstance in which we did the thing that we did. All that matters is that we apologize and we move on, right? And then oftentimes what our caregivers will have done, or I have seen our caregivers do, is then they'll say, hug it out, right? Forgive each other. Your sisters. You shouldn't be upset at each other. Some type of narrative like that. And so, of course, if we're kind of brought up in this environment where our actual internal experiences doesn't really matter, why we did it doesn't matter, and the fact that we're not ready to apologize and move on doesn't matter, then of course that we're going to internalize the fact that, the problem isn't us. The problem is that we can't forgive, let go, apologize, accept, move on. right? That's the problem. Not the problem is that our parents attempted to gaslight us and force us into something we weren't ready for. That's not the problem. It's the way in which our brain understands this, we're to blame for our struggles and our internal psychic pain. It takes a lot of work for us to kind of untether from that. But the fact of the matter is, wherever, this can really kind of join well with the conversation about toxic positivity, right? Forcing ourselves to be positive. The problem with forcing ourselves to be positive is that we don't actually then learn how to hold and navigate and be with our negative, quote unquote, experiences. I teach in my one-on-one work and with Worthy Women Rise, I don't even use the words negative and positive to describe my internal experience. I don't actually find meaning in those words. Some of us like that, positive, negative. I personally don't find meaning. I don't actually know what negative or positive internal experience actually means because it's very cultural based. For some people, joy and happiness are actually tremendously hard to feel. Whereas sadness or melancholy or resentment is a much easier emotion to feel. So which one's positive and which one's negative? And so I prefer to differentiate our internal experiences between what feels more easy and what feels more difficult. And for many of us, it's so inherently true and built into our psyche that when we're first forced to be positive, when we were forced to be a way that we were not, we don't actually learn how to be more of that way. We don't learn how to be more positive. All we are learning is that how we are inherently feeling is bad, wrong, broken, etc. Now, as adults, it's time for us to change that. So I really want us to maybe begin to interrogate what it really means by really being human. Like, what is our real goal here? If the goal is to be more positive, then that may be coming out of a wound and not out of a more healed understanding of the world, which is that the goal is truly, for each of us is different and we each have to set our own thing. But that maybe our goal, if it's coming from a more healed place, is actually coming from a fuller, richer human experience, like to be able to hold our internal experiences without acting out or without hurting people or without damaging relationships. Maybe that feels like a more richer goal than to be happy. I just snorted. I just find it a little silly that there's so much pressure on us to be happy. Like, why do we owe the world happiness? I know that we want to experience happiness, but turns out experiencing happiness requires us to do a lot of things that our culture and our world would not really accept, would not really tolerate. Our culture doesn't actually want us happy, but that's another podcast for another day. And so just to loop it back to what I wrote, I want to embody fire and fullness and look back at my life and think, wow, I really gave every conflict, every challenge, every hardship my very best. I want to be known as the one who showed up for myself unapologetically. That's what I want. That's what it means when I think and I evoke the sense of life is short. Life is short, so feel everything, my friend. Life is short, so don't deny yourself the experience of tending to and knowing your psychic pain, what feels hard within you. Life is short, so show up fully for yourself, your goals, your dreams, your desires. Life is short, so go after what you want. And make sure that you're building within yourself the capacity to expand your container so you can hold what it is that you want. Life is short, so learn the ways that you abandon yourself so that you can come back home to yourself more than ever before. Life is short, so let yourself feel every emotion. Let yourself grieve fully. Let yourself be human. And you're going to find that your life is going to expand in brilliant, inordinate ways. When we can develop a curiosity about our internal world, everything starts to change. And, I'm not speaking of as if this is the end all be all of how we change the world. Obviously, there's many layers to how the world gets changed. But I have seen that a really important facet of change in the world is how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to our pain and how we relate to our internal experiences that don't fit the box of gratitude, that don't fit the box of perfection, that doesn't fit the box of people pleasing, that doesn't fit the box of productivity. Like, what would it mean for you to claim our vastness so that you may be unapologetically you? What is required inside of you in order for you to step into your most unapologetic self? That's what I want us to evoke when we think about this idea that life is short. And please resist the temptation in believing that you are a self-improvement project, that you are broken and that you need to be fixed. Please resist the temptation to believe that if you could just be more grateful or more positive or more happy, that you would be protected from the challenges of life. I promise you that's not how it works. It is by knowing how we understand our pain that will change how we relate to pain when it happens. So let this be just something for you to marinate on, for you to think about, for you to munch on and digest in your own life. How can you practice being more full within yourself? That's what this podcast is about. That's what I'm here to stand for. And that's what I'm celebrating you in your journey on, okay? I believe in you. I'm celebrating you. Life is way too short. Let us live it fully in the fullness of our fire. I'll see you all next week.